And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
Well, it looks like we're live, guys. We've got an exciting debate tonight. We've got SpeedOfSound, who's been here before, as well as John Maddox, who needs no introduction, of course. He's been here many times before as well. We're going to be debating intelligent design versus naturalism tonight. So everybody in the audience, hopefully you're excited this one, because this one's been in the making for a while. We've been putting out a lot of debates, discussions, keep everybody entertained. We have a few more as well that we're working on getting confirmed in the next week. Tomorrow we do have John Maddox versus Gutsick Gibbon on roughly the same topic. So that one is confirmed for 9:30. Be sure to look out for that one. That one's going to be exciting. So before we get into it, why don't we give the debaters, both Mike and John, just a moment of introduction. If they want to plug in their channels or tell us what they're doing, what they're up to, I think that's always a good way to start. Mike, why don't we start with you? How's it going?
It's going good. I would like to have a channel, but production is a little bit difficult, and I suck at it. So I haven't put anything on my channel yet. It's good. I had to name it Speed of Sound of Gravity because Speed of Sound had too much noise. Anyway, basically, I'm a high school dropout from the Iron Range, and I started my career out as an iron miner. Prior to that, I was a baker, actually, but iron miner is what I was. And I don't know much, and that's about all I got to say.
Well, we always appreciate you giving us your time. So thanks for that there, Mike. You're always welcome, of course, on this channel, especially with debates and discussions. We look for gracious dialogue, with differing opinions. So we always welcome those with differing opinions. John, thanks for being with us today. Over to you, brother.
Oh, excited to be here again. Hopefully we'll have a great conversation. My channel is Logical, Plausible, Probable. So if you want to see some of my videos, just go over there. I try to look at different arguments and different aspects of existence, philosophy, and in this context, intelligent design versus naturalism and random chance occurrences to account for our existence. Part of the reason I do this is I almost died about 7 years ago, and in that time frame, I realized that there was much more to existence and than just being consumed with making money. And I decided to use the gifts I was given to make arguments and hopefully open people's eyes to the what I like to call, which is the greatest scam on earth, and a little jab towards Richard Dawkins that there is much more evidence to our existence being the result of a creator and an intelligent designer rather than undirected process.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Yeah, if you like what John's saying and the stuff he's putting out, please look to his channel and subscribe. He's got some great content. Same with Speed of Sound. I know you said you're not really putting out much right now, but if people are interested, if they like what they're hearing, go over there and subscribe to Mike. So that being said, why don't we jump into just some brief opening statements, equally timed. I'm not sure who wants to start, but if there's a volunteer, and then we're going to jump into just free-flowing dialogue and discussion for the remaining portion of the debate. Which one of you guys would like to start?
I'll start. I've only got about, mine is going to take about 1 minute.
Sure. You take your time, and then we'll hand it over to John for him to take his time, and then boom, we're going to jump right into discussion. Go ahead, Mike.
So I have a book here by called The Logic of Chance by Eugene V. Koonin. That when I was in a debate with Nephilim, he quoted this book on page 391. And I looked up intelligent design in the index, and I found two entries. The most amazing one was a little note in the back where he says, he was talking about Michael B. He says, an irreducible complexity. He says, to be he and other ID advocates, the irreducibility of complex biological structures is evidence, even proof, of the inevitability of ID. And then he says, of course, ID is malicious nonsense. But the term irreducible complexity is quite evocative. However, evolutionary biologists might prefer to speak of apparent or purported irreducibility of complex structures. So he's not your friend, basically. And if you look on page 391, you read a little further on, he sort of makes a case for the logic of chance and probability. Anyway, that's my opening. That's all I got. John?
All right. Praise, I got to share my screen.
I get to watch.
Hey, Praise, it's not letting me share. Do you have the share settings turned off? It's not giving me the praise.
I think Praise might have fallen asleep there for a second.
I got it. All right. So tonight, folks, we're going to talk about intelligent design versus ultimately undirected processes. And my position is we have to decide which one is the more plausible conclusion. And as a foundation to that, what is really required for life? Now, there's literally thousands of different elements that are all recognized as being requirements for life as we know it. But at the ultimate core is the genetic code, its syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, and then ultimately how that translates into gene expression, DNA being turned into RNA, RNA being translated into a protein, and then ultimately protein post-ribosome synthesis being modified for ultimate outcomes. Now, the reason I bring this as kind of a foundational piece is this quote here: "The origin of the code is perhaps the most perplexing problem in evolutionary biology. The existing translation machinery is at the same time so complex, so universal, and so essential that it is hard to see how it could have come into existence or how life could have existed without it." It's James Smith and E. I do not know how to pronounce that guy's name, but Oxford Press from 1995. Now, the genetic code enigma is a commonly used term in a variety of papers, and I want to dive into the fundamentals of it and how it fulfills all the parameters of a code. So codes require arbitrary values, coding tables, a translation process that is done by turning it into also arbitrarily assigned values. And in the context of genetics, codon equals amino acid is a fundamental component, but most importantly, and why these are unavoidable arbitrary value assignments, is codons are translated by the ribosome. Codons do not become amino acids, and codons do not chemically interact with amino acids. So to say that there is not a direct semantic information transfer occurring is ignoring reality, which is there is no actual interaction other than through a mediary. And this is another quote I love. "Even a perfunctory inspection of the standard genetic code table, yada yada, shows that the arrangement of amino acid assignments is manifestly non-random." Now, going a step further in the genetic code enigma is that it also fulfills parameters of a programming language. It has input, output, codons equal syntax, space plus time expression equals semantics, controlled variable outcomes equals pragmatics. It has if, then, else functions, and has been determined to be a Turing complete model. Great. One of my favorite quotes from Dennis Noble, a Royal Society fellow. This is back in 2015. "Where then does the full algorithmic logic of a program lie? Where, for example, do we find the equivalent of if, then, else type instructions? The answer is in the cell or organism as a whole, not just in the genome," which takes the foundation of the argument that I'm making to an entirely different level, which is that this is a complex multi-directional communication system and programming aspect of biological function and biological computation, which enables the expression of these parameters that are required for life to exist. So, therefore, if codes require intelligence to assign arbitrary values, and decoding requires equal arbitrarily assigned values, and the genetic code is encoded, transferred, and decoded, and genetic expression requires translation of arbitrary values, then it is my assertion a mind was required for the genetic code to exist. If coding and programming information semantics are immaterial, and the medium which contains it is not relevant to its existence, then no undirected process can have created it. If programming requires if, then, else logic rules, and syntax, semantics, and pragmatics are required for its execution, and biological cells contain all of these and the tools for execution, and if no other programming would happen by chance, then in biology and for our existence, an intelligent agent is required for the initial programming. And then from a root chemistry perspective, cause and effect, physical determinism, in other words, cannot account for the programming of sequence-dependent biofunction. Now, that's kind of the end of my initial statement there, but the things we have to really consider is that when you really start to consider the plethora of variables that are required which circumvent pure cause and effect deterministic chemistry, and there's plenty of other aspects in other papers where they talk about how biology itself needs to be removed from physics and chemistry, basic physics and chemistry, because it circumvents those basic rules in so many different aspects. So I'm ready to get into this debate, but I hope people will consider those arguments and really start to ponder things beyond just, hey, it just happened, therefore we are here, and actually look at the requirements for life to exist.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that opening statement there, John. Thanks to you as well, Mike. We are going into a free-flowing discussion. I'm here, obviously, in case things get out of hand, but I've seen both of you debate, so I doubt that I'm going to have to jump in. Just keep it respectful and as equally timed as possible. So whoever wants to ask the first question or start, go ahead.
Oh, let's see. This Dennis Noble guy. So you kind of you like him, basically?
I mean, I like a lot of the stuff he talks about. Yeah, I mean, he's an atheist and he's a evolutionist, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't recognize the. Actually, I don't know if he's an atheist anymore, but I mean, he's still an evolutionist, but it doesn't mean that he does not recognize that the perfunctory elements to my argument are absolutely in existence and are not in a analogous or analogies or metaphors. They are literal, and whether or not I have a different interpretation of the root cause between he and I has no relevance to the position that I'm taking.
Okay, so Dennis Noble in Dance to the Tune of Life, he talks about programs and code in DNA, and he pushes back seriously against it. In fact, his in his Principles of Systems Biology, he said the theory. There is no genetic program. There are no programs at any other level. There are no programs in the brain, basically. And he says this is true of all such programs. To call them genetic programs or gene networks is to fuel a misconception that all of the active causal determination lies in one-dimensional DNA sequences. It doesn't. It also lies in three-dimensional static and dynamical structures of the cell, tissues, and organs. Dennis Noble is probably one of the guys that are on the forefront of biosemiotics. And I have been into biosemiotics and embodied mind theory since 2010 about. 2012 was my introduction to biosemiotics with Terrence Deacon. He wrote a book and he did a thing on NPR. I was driving home from northern Minnesota, listened to him talk for 2 hours about the new paradigm in biology, which is basically that they admit that DNA, that the strand of DNA is information. They admit that there is a code there, and the code is not connected. Semiotics is about basically signs. You have a sign, which would be the DNA. You have a code maker or a convention, which would be a ribosome, and then you have a result, which would be the protein or life in the cell or whatever. So these guys, you mentioned a whole bunch of papers from the Royal Society. I mentioned one. I printed out about 20 of them, and none of them say anything about intelligent design in a favorable manner, or nor do they make the logical inference from it is complex, therefore it has to be designed.
Well, I'm not, as I stated a moment ago, I'm pretty sure I said that I recognize that Dennis Noble specifically doesn't have the same root opinion as I do. It doesn't mean that it changes the logic behind my argument, which is if these things are required for life, which, as you just admitted, they also admit is true, then for me to make the conclusion that it is not a reasonable root cause of our existence that those things could happen without intelligence, because in no other context could they, doesn't really have any relevance, and I'm not really sure what your point is, because they disagree. Doesn't really have any relevance to our discussion.
Okay, my point is you came up with a quote that sounded like he was saying that DNA was a code. Well, and his book says that no, that is
as of I believe it was May of 2019. He is now sitting on. He and the Royal Society officially joined a convention to have a $10 million prize for anybody who can come up with a natural code. He actually deemed it I believe it was the least addressed question in science, and is going to be one of the judges of it. And the specifics were it had to fulfill all of the fundamentals of a code, just like we apply to any other type of coding. So he he may have changed his opinion since his book, because this was 2019, and you can go to the Oxford YouTube channel and watch the interviews with him discussing this in great detail as he and the Royal Society became components of this.
What do you think offering this prize means he changed his mind?
Because he literally stated what it was literally stated what the requirements were, and that yes, this is genetics, and genetics does embody all of these things, and yes, it is a code. So I'm not really here to go back and forth on what Dennis Noble's opinion is. If anybody just doesn't believe me, go over to Oxford's channel and go watch the interview.
I don't follow how offering a $10 million prize for proof of abiogenesis or a complex system developing itself, which is what Lee Cronin is working on, leads to the conclusion that Dennis Noble has suddenly changed his mind, and that his book, which was written in, let's see, when did he write Dance of Life? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I go with what he said last year, and another one of his papers where he goes into great detail about this, about programming.
He wrote this in 2017. So, I mean, that's 2 years ago. You think he changed himself radically from that?
Well, all I know is in 2019 is what I'm referring to.
So in 2 years?
Listen, Mike, we're not going to sit here and waste time on arguing about Dennis Noble. We're here to discuss the existence of life. And I have just answered your question, which is, do I think he has changed his opinion? I would say so, given the fact that as of May 2019, he is now an official arbiter and judge of this as a representative of the Royal Society, which, quote his words, one of the we're kind of one of the most prestigious institutions on the planet. So I suggest you take it up with him if you disagree, or go watch the videos and his interviews.
No, I don't have to take it up with him. I have to take it up with you, because you're wrong about what Dennis Noble thinks. I'm quite familiar with what he thinks, and I've listened to a great deal of his work. I have his papers. I have his book. I was reading his book today. You picked a quote out of somewhere, and I'm not sure exactly where you got that quote. You probably got it out of this book.
No, actually, I got it from his papers. But anyway,
look again at the
Michael. Why don't we move on to something that's more substantive than you and I having a pissing contest over what Dennis Noble thinks?
Oh, we're having
versus the arguments that I have made, which are, well, I'll ask you a direct question. Since you're into biosemiotics, which I am as well, is it your position that, I think you mentioned this, but I just want to clarify, is it your position that the genetic code is exactly that? It has immaterial information that is translated expressed into all aspects of biological function.
I don't know what immaterial information is. I don't agree with that term at all.
Are semantics immaterial or material?
Material. Everything is material.
So you think that it is your opinion that the meaning of a word is material versus immaterial?
The meaning of the word is material. Yes.
How so?
That's what biosemiotics teaches us, is the relationship of the triad, basically the sign, the convention, and the object. So there's a triad there. It's all material. Nobody denies that. It's Charles Sanders Peirce. Are you familiar with him?
I know the name, and I would say that there are quite a few papers where from people in biosemiotics that clearly talk about immaterial information. But go ahead.
Charles Sanders Peirce basically created semiotics, and well, he didn't invent it, but he definitely laid down the Bible for it. So, and his whole point was the relationship, and that it has a physical manifestation. We take the signs basically in our subjective opinion, our hominid tool-making ape opinion, that it is immaterial, and we imagine these immaterial things, but at the end of the day, it is always all material. There's nothing that you can show me that is not material in the world. We're communicating through a material medium right now.
Is mathematics material?
Yes.
How?
It is based on
are mathematical principles material? Not what they're based on. Are the mathematical principles actually material?
Yes, you get pi from a circle, and a circle is a material thing.
Something can be executed but it doesn't mean that the root of it is material. Is logic material?
Yes.
You think logical thought is material?
Totally.
Not that you can execute something via logic, but that the logical principle itself, you're saying that is material.
It is. It's definitely in the material world. We get
No,
the idea.
the effect of it can be executed in the material world. The
You-
logic itself is not. That's a well-established premise in philosophy, that mathematics and logic is immaterial.
You're tending to talk over me a little bit. Basically, we get the idea of logical conditions like and or not, whatever, by material objects, and that's how our brain is built. We start out with nothing in our brain, basically, except a few connections, and the material world teaches us logic, teaches us mathematics, teaches us all these connections. It's all in the world, and at some level, you can always find it in the world.
Okay, so are you stating that arbitrary values that are assigned to something, those but are only interpreted through an intelligent agent in any other context that we recognize, or through a physical component like a computer that has been given the logic rules to interpret it, are you stating that arbitrary and abstract values are material?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that literally goes against the definition of abstract.
We're going to go down a metaphysical hole here that's pretty deep. Do you want to do that, or do you want to talk about programming and program code?
Well, I mean, that's where I was going, and you've been.
I'm a strict
So I guess let's go down to the coding route. Okay, so in any other context other than genetics, is it your opinion that what we view as programming languages, the syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, which are required for them, and then the translational compilation processes, is it your position that those things can happen without intelligent agents?
Programs? You mean computers?
Yeah, I'm talking about programming languages.
Could they happen without intelligent agents?
Yes. Can
No.
the
Very likely.
I mean, that's a could they or could they not, because we're talking about arbitrary values being assigned and syntax, which is, I mean, to the syntax, and then the interpretation process for the semantics and the pragmatics. So that's pretty much a yes or no question. Can they be done with or without an intelligent agent?
I'm pretty much not a yes or no kind of guy. You familiar with Douglas Adams and the whale and the let's see, what was it? A whale and what else was it? A plant, a pitcher that were created suddenly in the void up above, and they were crashing toward Earth. Are you familiar with that scene? When you
I asked a direct question about programming languages.
Computers are material, so I mean, if a star.
I'm talking about the language.
Huh?
I'm talking about the language and the meaning assigned to the language, which is how it is actually becomes worth anything and can execute any function. How can those logic rules and the syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, which are required for any programming language to exist? This is a very well documented and recognized fact in computer science and information theory. Can those things exist without intelligence agents in any other context, stepping aside from nature? Can any of those things exist without an intelligent agent?
Yes, they exist in biology without an intelligent agent.
I literally just said, stepping aside from the biological argument, in any other context, can they exist without an intelligent agent?
I don't have the imagination to find one right now, so maybe not, but I'm sure we could think of something.
Well, I don't think you can, because it's recognized that other than what we see in genetics, that every single other variation has been created by an intelligent agent.
Your mind did not create the intelligence, basically, or the information. The information created your mind, and now you're trying to take credit for it. And I see it the other way around. Do you know what a strict naturalist is?
I'm aware of that. So it is your position that the when Turing and von Neumann and the others were creating computer science, and heck, binary was created back in like 1638. Are you suggesting that the intelligence of the person who originally created binary, I forget his name, are you saying that he did not create binary code?
No. He came up with it. That's fine. The punch card, I think, was kind of the beginning of computation, and that was a physical medium. And they used to have.
I mean, the abacus was the original physical piece of computation.
Yeah, we could.
And then binary was created. I'm pretty sure it was 1638 or 1632, somewhere around there.
If you want to be retro, yeah, go ahead.
Well, binary is not exactly retro. I mean, it's used in literally everything that we do in technology today. But the point I'm making is that binary originally existed in a thought, and then was transcribed into a physically interpretable medium. And then fast forward to the 60s, and was being able to be executed through physical punch cards. And then now the exact same premise is being executed in a electronic form with modern technologies. But this goes back to, are you, in your strict naturalist perspective, are you suggesting that without the minds of the humans who developed these things over centuries, that these things could ever have come into existence?
I don't. You're asking if human tools could come into existence without humans?
I'm asking if the syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, which you are arguing are purely material, could ever come into existence without an intelligent agent existing in order to derive them and assign the values.
Depends on how you define intelligence. How are you defining intelligence? You're defining intelligence as human intelligence?
So
Horses might disagree with you.
Okay, do you actually think that a bird could develop binary code?
A bird could develop. We got a woodpecker out back, and I swear he's working on it.
But answer questions directly, man. Not just trying to dodge every single one. If strict naturalists, if all you're going to do is, I guess a bird might be able to. This is a very basic question.
And you like to talk over people, don't you? You're trying to get me to say that basically a human tool can come into existence without a human. Probably not. Not likely. I mean, computers are human tools, and we derive them from the physical nature of our surroundings. A monkey, if covered its eyes and uncovered his eyes, he just invented binary. I mean, it exists in the physical world, and you're in a prejudiced manner. You're defining information as having to have an intelligence. It's the other way around. Information.
No.
Intelligence.
No, I am arguing that syntax, semantics, and pragmatics and arbitrarily assigned values require intelligence.
What do you think pragmatics is? How do you define that? Consider. Let's talk about DNA and the ribosome. How would you define pragmatics in that?
In terms of pragmatics, I mean, there's a plethora of different ways that could be interpreted, but the controlled variable outcomes, for example, one would be the microRNAs when they're silencing or modifying the outcome of a gene sequence to have a different outcome based on external variables, i.e. stress, heat, cold, sickness, shortage of whichever the end protein is. It modifies the data on the fly and changes the outcome.
Yeah.
You also have things like epigenetics, which, as I'm sure you're aware, can dramatically modify the core. And this is obviously a hybrid of, or a conjunction of semantics and pragmatics, but are dramatically changing the outcome of what would be the standard variable.
Right.
And those are the things that in programming are baseline fundamentals to even be considered a programming language. And
programming language works like that, where it modifies its own code.
Well, if you're getting into dynamic programming and what we're trying to do with machine learning and artificial intelligence, then absolutely.
Well, machine learning, we don't exactly know how those neural networks do what they do. We train them up, and we can look at the micro states. We can look at the micro level, but nobody knows after you've trained basically a neural net to recognize a rabbit in a Google image. Nobody knows exactly how that recognition happens. That kind of intelligence is pretty much beyond us, and that's how the cell works, basically. But anyway, on pragmatic,
I'm aware of that, and the point I'm making is that we are attempting to create the type of computational ability and dynamic variable expression of functions. We are attempting to do that in every aspect of human technology at the highest level. Like, we are trying to pull that off.
Are you a programmer?
I am.
What do you program in?
Python, PHP, JavaScript, and I know the other markup languages, HTML, CSS. I did it a while. I used to own a software development company. Now I do mostly consulting, but it's anyway. Go ahead.
You familiar with Haskell and functional programming languages? Haskell.
What is your point? Yes, I'm familiar with all. Just kids. What's your point?
Are you familiar with Haskell? It's a yes or no question. You love.
Now you want yes or no. You won't answer any of my stuff yes or no.
Well,
okay. Continue. Go ahead. Expand your point.
So you don't know what Haskell is, anyway.
Expand your point.
Functional programming languages are. No, I'm just curious about what your background is and what you develop in. What do you do with Python? What kind of? I'm curious as to.
I've played around mostly with bioinformatics stuff with Python, but
okay. I do a lot of bioinformatics with Python myself, and but I'm pretty much a Ruby, React, ES6 programmer, Ruby, and C++. I don't know, a whole bunch of other stuff. I've been doing this for 40 years. Anyway, back to pragmatics. Your man from the Royal Society, Adami, wrote a paper, and he talks about pragmatics, and I think he defines it as we have information, like we have information in DNA, and then pragmatics is when you have an observer. So you have a human around that's basically deciding, okay, this DNA turns into a protein, and it has this function, and it does this, and basically that's how he defines pragmatics. But it was those guys, they get so deep into information theory. But what I don't see any of them doing is claiming there has to be an intelligence to create biological information in that DNA code. There is like that DNA code, it could have been anything, right? You agree with that? It could have been an alternative code.
Well, I think in the studies that I've read, yes, there's I think it's like 10 to the 82nd or 89th, something like that, of possibles. But they determined that.
But wait, what is that?
What?
What are you talking about? 10 to the 89th for possible what?
Possible codes.
Possible codes?
The one that we experience is
it would be infinite, because you could have as many codons as you want. You can always add another codon. I mean, it's infinite. It's not. There's no number for that. Well, it just happens to be.
Well, the paper I read, I believe it was 10 to the 89th. It was either 10 to the 82nd, 10 to the 89th. I forget.
Do you know what paper that is?
They were talking. Huh?
Do you know what paper that is?
I'll have to go look. I was reading it last night. I'll have to look it up again.
Can you send me?
Yes, dude. Okay. Anyway, the point is, okay, whether it's infinite or 10 to the 80, I mean, 10 in context of reality, as I'm sure you're aware, something that's 10 to the 89th is basically the equivalent of infinite.
Okay. Basically, the code is disconnected from the amino acid that gets hooked onto the nascent protein, and it's completely independent. And there are alternative interpretations of those four nucleic acids that exist in the mitochondria, and they exist in a lot of some prokaryotes. So there are different codes, basically, but this one seems to be pretty much universal in eukaryotes and most prokaryotes now.
Right.
But I mean, it was not necessarily that way in the past. It could have been very, very different in the past. So anyway, you do agree that there could be alternative codes and that there is no connection.
Well,
And that,
of course, there's alternative. I mean, there's alternatives. I mean, right now, every major tech company on the planet is trying to create their own syntax to do data storage in DNA under different different variations. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, and that's kind of the point. Is yes, beyond all doubt, there is a programming code base that is being executed in genetics. So whether or not there are other variations, I mean, that's like saying, oh, in using English, you could, and English and binary, you could only have C++. I mean, that's it's kind of the equivalent of what is being said here of, oh yeah, there's other possibilities. However, what they have discovered, and I'm sure you're probably aware, is that the one we experience is probably, I think it was the word they used, the most stable version.
what?
Like,
Why?
That's what they said in the research that I read.
You don't know why. You don't understand why. What you mean? The three codon?
Well, there's robustness. There's There's redundancy. I mean, we can go off on that whole tangent if you want to. I'm just stating what was has been relatively established in genetics.
I've never heard that in all my reading of genetics and molecular biology. I've never heard that was the best code. I heard it was completely arbitrary. I mean, there's a number of ways.
So you are admitting that it's arbitrary value assignment.
It is arbitrary, right? It's a code, and that's the whole point of biosemiotics, and that's where it differs from the reductive approach. The people that would say to you that it's just chemicals, bumping into each other. I mean, there's something else going on with life, and obviously, life is a very, very different kind of animal, which I can't believe I just said that. But anyway, it's a very, very different thing in the physical world than say rock. Well, there are some really interesting rocks, and there's some very interesting inorganic compounds and crystals and really strange structures. So I don't know if I want to be prejudiced toward, and say life is so wonderful. But anyway, there is an information structure in life, and it is also autopoietic. Are you familiar with autopoiesis?
I'm actually glad that you're going down this rabbit hole. Continue.
Okay. Autopoiesis? Are you familiar?
I don't know if I remember that term, but I'm very happy you're going down. You're admitting that it is arbitrary. Go ahead.
It means self-creating, that life is self-generating, self-creating, self-changing. And the thing that I think you miss is that it keeps changing, that in each cycle of it changes into something else. You are not the same as your father or your grandfather. Your kids are not the same as you. It just keeps moving. And it started moving a very, very long time ago. But I got to ask you some questions about your position, because I'm not sure. I'm sort of got a moving target here. Now, you believe in intelligent design, right?
I mean, I think that's rather obvious.
Okay, good. So when did this intelligence happen back in history? Back 4.2, let's go back all the way across 4.2 billion years. When was the intelligence injected into life?
I'm not really sure how that's relevant to whether or not there was intelligence.
What? Of course.
I thought we were debating whether or not there was an intelligence required or not.
Well, for the required,
so I don't really. It doesn't really matter when the specific time was. It's whether or not it's just whether or not it's required for life.
Idea is not going to be science until you guys settle on a time, until you settle on a place in that. In the origin of life story, you've got to settle on a place. Was it eukaryotic cells? Was that intelligently put together or created like I would create a table in my garage?
I mean, directly answer your question. I mean, my personal opinion is that we are not from. I mean, you're asking me if I'm agreeing with a single cell and upward growth, and I do not. I think that things were created in their functional form.
Okay, you think things were created 6,000 years ago as kinds?
Again, the time factor has zero relevance to whether or not A, I think they were, and yes, I do, and B, that
do with it.
no, it doesn't. The full structure of of genetics and a genome for all known forms of life exists in a functional form that we observe. And we observe, yes, we see replication? Absolutely. Do we see slight modifications? Absolutely. What are they result of? Well, what we're discovering now is that they're the result of almost 99% of them are epigenetic variables. And
what? No.
Yeah.
No. Where do you get 99% epigenetic? No, genes code for things. The information has a hell of a lot to do with it. Epigenetics is
I'm talking about modifications to the expression of the existing the source data.
You talking about tissue types?
No, I'm talking about. Okay, are you familiar with epigenetics?
Yes, I've got books on it. Thick ones.
Okay, so I don't care about. We're talking conceptually here. What we are discovering are the outcomes of epigenetic variation, right? Methylation, the different what actually happens when that occurs, right? Those are modifications to the existing source code, correct?
I was reading about that stuff 16 years ago. It's it's modifications to the temporal pattern in which things express. It controls tissue type primarily. And
you think epigenetic only?
Do you understand how chromosomes are organized in the cell and how they basically how they're expressed?
I do, and I'm not suggesting that.
You know about chromosome regions?
Oh my God. Okay, we're discussing. This is like basic stuff. We're talking about epigenetics, and you're telling me that you think the majority of epigenetics is just tissue modification?
That's primarily what happened. That's primarily what epigenetics controls when it's expressed, right?
That's one aspect of what epigenetics does.
What is the other aspect?
It also determines whether or not certain things are even expressed at all.
Yes,
they've been discovering that in the context of yes, something modified between this generation and that generation. But what we're finding is many of the majority of those modifications are the result of epigenetics that were passed in the areas that were not didn't have the imprinting, and and within a couple of generations, a lot of those modifications fall off.
Yes,
they're not permanent.
Epigenetics is not permanent. No, it might, and they were surprised kind of to find out that it went down 1 or 2 generations, and it does. But then since then, we've learned a hell of a lot about other things that are transferred from mommy to the children, like the gamete, for instance. But epigenetics, that's the naive version of epigenetics. There are 12 different mechanisms: ubiquitination, methylation, just a whole bunch of them.
I'm aware that there's many more.
But it's all about when a gene is expressed. And some are promoted. I mean, there are promotional epigenetics.
I'm not. You do realize I'm not disagreeing with you. There's multiple variables. I'm in agreement with you on that. What I'm saying is
99%, and I'm just like, whoa, what do you mean 99? Well, I guess
I'm referring to the evolutionary model that the.
What are you talking about?
These modifications. You were talking about all this growth and change over time, right? And I'm not suggesting that. The point I was making is that I'm not suggesting that there aren't things that modify and adapt. The point I'm making is that they are generally variations on existing function, and then we have to go back to where did the existing functions come from, and what are the root requirements for those existing functions to exist, and if they require logic rules and programming and syntax, semantics, and pragmatics that I think we're actually kind of agreeing on here, is what is, in any other context, what are the requirements for those things to exist? And which is why I asked you the question in the beginning of, separate from nature, could any of those things exist without intelligent agents? Which you kind of danced around.
Well, of course they can.
So how do you explain the genetic code coming into existence then?
Are we going to talk about abiogenesis, or are we going to talk about eukaryotic cells?
No, we're talking about abiogenesis.
Okay, we're talking about the very beginning. You want me to peer back 4.2 billion years ago and conjecture about what's going on? I've got a ton of books.
You wanted me to conjecture on what the time was 4.5
Well,
billion years ago when the intelligent agent came into play. So what I'm saying is, if you are arguing that one is not required, then
Right.
in any other context, what we observe would require an intelligent agent. Then what is your position of how it happened without one?
When have we ever observed an intelligent agent creating a life?
No, I'm talking about the fund. I mean, are you not actually listening? Because are you just trying to dodge? Because you know exactly what my position is. I made it.
I'm
very
listening
clear.
to exactly what you're saying, and I'm
So,
trying to get you to see how ridiculous your position is. You're saying that an intelligent agent's designed life, and you can't tell me an instance of an intelligent agent designing a life. So obviously, life had to come from something that was not an intelligent agent. Well, the universe is intelligent.
That's a presupposition. That
Presupposition.
My presupposition is that based on the evidence that it is the more logical, plausible, and probable conclusion that an intelligent agent was required.
Based on the interpretation of the evidence.
Because in no other context would the things that are required for life, in any other context, be considered to be able to exist without an intelligent agent. And if we have no, and that's why I'm asking you the direct question of what is your, I don't care what it says in the books, or you can quote books, I don't care. I want to know what your position is of how the genetic code and the proteins required for its expression, what is your position on how that came into existence? Mine is that an intelligent agent was required. That's my position. What is yours?
Mine is that it happened in a kind of the hellfire of the early 100 billion year old Earth, with boiling water and smoking hydrothermal vents and all sorts of minerals and clays interacting and bombardment from outer space and all of that coming together. And basically there is some mechanism by which it happened, but we will probably never figure out exactly which one it was, because I think there's probably thousands of different ways that it could have happened. So my position is strict naturalism. I don't believe there was any intelligence. I believe life was self-creating. I don't think early life had the DNA code or made proteins or any of that. I think the very earliest pieces of life were probably like a little bubbling clay cylinder with a hydrogen gradient.
Okay, so then how did that turn into what we now observe as life?
Well, that's kind of what we're working on. You know, what do you expect? It's only 2020, dude. It's not 2400, 24 whatever.
So is it your opinion that through undirected process, non-random information can come into existence?
Yes, I believe that it's inevitable. I think in this temperature band that we're in on the Earth, we're in that the Goldilocks zone, basically, where water is liquid and things get occasionally hot and water. We're right at those three states, with water.
Yeah,
but when that happens, it is inevitable that.
Yeah, but per the non-intelligent design position, the early Earth that is being claimed to have been the environment for life to come into existence was nothing like it is now.
Right. It was very, very strange.
And it was harsh. It was a harsh reality back then, per the position that's taken. And from a chemistry perspective, that absolutely eviscerates the positions that somehow this stuff could just form and stay in that structure, when we know that RNA, for example, inside of a cell, when it's protected, only has about a 15 to 20 minute shelf life. And
you're talking about protein 15 to 20 minute shelf life. Did you know that mRNA has a 10-hour half-life? Do you know why it does?
After it has been
created?
After it's been modified. and structured, and yeah, absolutely. If that stuff doesn't happen, it's also inside the cytoplasm at that point,
And
and has the cell membranes, which is the entire point I was making. Inside of an existing cell, the potential life of it can expand dramatically, but when you take that away, it shrinks.
Do you know what a poly A tail is?
Continue.
Okay, you don't. Okay, basically the 5' cap on mRNA and the poly A tail is what keeps it basically stable. And they've also created in a lab small basically polymer RNAs that are stable, surprisingly stable, because it loops back on itself. And there's just all sorts of possibilities. And we don't know if it was RNA back then. We don't know if it was RNA.
In what we observe, what causes that? Is it proteins?
What causes what?
What we're discussing right now. Are proteins what are required for what you just described to even happen?
For what part of what I described? I'm not following you.
Okay. For mRNA to exist,
yep.
What is required?
What is required for mRNA to exist? You mean for it to be created?
I mean, I think that's what exist means. Yeah.
Basically polymerase II and a bunch of. Okay, now we're talking about eukaryotic cells again. We've left abiogenesis.
No, right now you're talking about mRNA and its stability, and I'm saying, how does mRNA even come into existence? And as you know, and you're starting to describe there, is that it requires proteins.
How does it come into existence in a eukaryotic cell, which is what happens now? We were talking 4.2 billion years ago. All field you want to land on.
So
coming down with the goalposts.
Well, no, I'm not changing the goalposts. The logic applies to both sides.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, are you suggesting that mRNA can somehow be transcribed from DNA way back when, pre-life, unless a protein exists? Is that what
I think DNA existed 4.2 billion years ago. We're talking about abiogenesis.
I don't think that.
You keep bringing concepts.
Are you saying that clay is life? Is that what you're saying?
Clay and possibly many different nucleotides, many different amino acids, all sorts of sugars and phospholipids, and God knows what we had back then. There are a lot of varieties of organic chemicals.
Right, but nobody suggests that organic chemicals by themselves are life.
You're looking at a point where there's no life and a point where there is life, and you're trying to find the line. You're not going to find that.
Well, that's like saying that because you have the bricks, mortar, wood frame, wires, and piping sitting on a piece of dirt, that it's somehow that constitutes a reasonable explanation for a house being built.
Now you're talking about apes and tool building. Tool building.
No, I'm making a direct comparison. You're stating that because organic chemicals are laying around, that somehow explains life coming into existence without an intelligent agent. And I am stating that is like saying you have all the pieces and the components required for a house sitting on a piece of dirt, and without an intelligent agent, somehow the house was built. The fact that the boards are sitting there has zero relevance to whether or not it's reasonable for a house to come into existence.
That's like Gene said in Standing, High Standing. That's like they're constantly thinking that life is like an automobile factory or the Ford Motor Company. I mean, you're using analogies from a tool building ape, which is basically our prejudice. We see everything as us coming up with an idea in our supposed minds and going out and suddenly creating it. Well, it doesn't just create with intelligence. You have to move your hands. You have to saw things. You have to look at things. You have to smell things. It's basically your prejudice is this tool building ape. So you see the tool building ape in all of life. Well, I don't.
So are you suggesting that
Genesis?
So you saying that things such as the helicase are not biomechanical machines?
What's that?
So are you suggesting that the helicase, for example, is not a nanomachine?
No, I would not call it a machine or a nanomachine. No.
Okay, well, I mean, it's well recognized as that, and many proteins are directly
There's a
referred
big
to
fight
as
going on.
nanomachines, and we are directly trying to create nanomachines. So you're saying that something that is a fundamental component for DNA transcription is and that operates just like a machine on the molecular level is not actually a machine.
We could call it a machine. We could also call it magic, like you do. I
I'm
mean,
not calling it magic. I'm calling it direct nanotechnology.
direct nanotechnology. I don't know. It's we're looking for nanomachines that work a little better than that shit in the cell. I mean, cells
Look a little better. Our best nanotech is a joke compared to the proteins that are making life possible.
Yeah, but at least it's going to be predictable when we get it, whereas the cell is totally unpredictable. I don't. Yeah, we endeavor to create wonderful machines, and I think we'll kick the cell's ass eventually if we keep working on it. The problem is we don't have little fingers like your God has. You know, we can't get in there and modify those molecules. So I'm getting very tired, John.
Okay, so let's real quick, just for the audience's sake.
You
Praise-
want to win for the audience's sake. Okay.
Praise, I'm gonna share my screen real quick.
And then we just have, I've got a question for you, John. Actually, as usual, we got a lot of questions that came in. Due to time constraints, Mike, if you don't mind, maybe we'll just spend 5 minutes just going through them really quick. Not all of them, maybe about 3 or 4 of them, and then call it a night. I know it's late for you, Mike.
We wanted to wrap up. Okay, well,
if you wanted to finish up your point there, John, of course, I just wanted to jump in and let everyone know about the question. So whatever you were going to do, John, proceed.
All right. Am I still sharing? Okay. All right. So this is animation of the DNA transcription process. I'm not sure why audio is not working, but those are recognized by pretty much every institution as of nanomachines. The helicase spins at, I think it's 100,000 RPMs a second. They're literally pulling, separating, copying both forward and backward simultaneously. And to me, yes, this is being done on a molecular level, but that is very obviously a technology that is being executed right there, and it is a well-recognized fundamental requirement of life. And to say that is not what that clearly is.
John, are you trying? Sorry to jump in. Are you trying to screen share something?
Is it not coming through?
No, I don't see anything. Praise, can you jump in here, please? Make sure that it's being screen shared, just so John can make his point.
Never mind. We'll do it another time.
Anyway, they're wonderful videos. They're wonderful teaching tools, and yes, that stuff is going on, and it's going on at that rate. And
okay, so but you just said that they're not machines. They're not nanomachines.
I wouldn't call them machines. They're sort of misleading.
It's okay. We'll wrap up the. Okay, so in your strict naturalist form, are you do you just avoid admitting that nanomachines exist in biology?
Nanomachines? Nanomachines are something we're working on. We're creating molecular machines, and they're going to be a little more predictable. But no, I think calling them machines and making all these analogies is misleading. Those animations, while they're wonderful, what they leave out is the fact that there's all these ions and all these proteins clustered together, slamming into each other, and it's all stochastic. And you're not seeing a real picture. We can't imagine. I mean, you can't look at atom balls. It's the atom ball idea of chemistry. People believe in it, and I use it all the time when I study organic chemistry, but it's not really what's happening, okay? We're down in a quantum world down there, And it's very, very different. And I just push back on calling them machines because you end up with silly ideas like ID, where you can't even tell me where the ID is injected.
So you're suggesting that when Harvard and MIT and Stanford and all of those institutions directly recognize proteins such as the helicase and others as nanomachines, are you stating that they are incorrect?
Have you read these papers from the Royal Society? They disagree with a lot of that terminology, and I do too. And sure, a lot of scientists are going to say they're machines, and I probably said they're machines too. And I could talk at length about how wonderful the nanomachines are in biochemistry, but I'm saying it's misleading. It gives you the wrong idea about how they came into being.
Okay, so how did they come into being?
We're going back 4.2.
No, I'm talking about right now. How did they come into being right now?
How do they come into being right now?
Yeah. What do we observe that makes them come into being?
Your mama.
I'm talking on a cellular level as we speak right now, happening inside your body. How do these things that you call not machines, but how do they come into existence?
How do they come into existence? Well, that's the whole of molecular biology, basically. The cell is a living organism. It's been around for 4.
No, I'm talking about the proteins that you're talking about not being machines. How do they come into existence inside of our cells billions of times a day?
Other proteins, other RNAs, and DNA, and many other little mechanisms.
So the DNA is a gene is transcribed into mRNA that goes to the ribosome, which then turns it into the information that is in the code into a protein, right?
And where did you get those original ribosomes and that original DNA from?
Well, that's the question.
I
have stated that it's an intelligent agent required because it is organized, non-random, specific information within a coding and a programming structure that has syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, and arbitrarily assigned values, which result in the specific sequence of information being translated into a functional protein, and that it requires a information transfer process, of arbitrary values, which I don't see how it is a remotely plausible conclusion that could not happen without an intelligent agent, when the things that we are trying to do that are similar absolutely 150% require a intelligent agent and are not anywhere close to as complex and exquisite and functional as what exists inside of every form of life.
Yeah, because we are life trying to recreate life, right? We're tool-making apes. I mean, that's all we are. And we're not very good at it. We're getting better, but I'm not sure how long I was muted, but basically you were a single cell. And that single cell inherited ribosomes and a number of others, mitochondria, cell membranes, and everything from your mother, who inherited from her mommy and daddy and her mommy and on and on back. And the whole thing starts 4.2 billion years ago. And there's a continuum, right? There's a continuum in this increasing complexity. And it's very, very difficult to look back 4.2 billion years and tell you exactly what path was taken.
So that single cell we started out as a zygote,
Right.
Did that zygote contain an entire genome?
Yes.
Okay, so it had all of the information requirements.
Well, no. It needed your mother's womb. It needed the world.
No. I'm saying it did have all the information requirements because the zygote is now a new life form. It's no longer the mother or the father.
Okay,
it's now a new one. So was all the information that was required for it to be able to grow inside the mother's, because the mother is providing the nutrients, right? But the mother is not actually the one that is doing the execution and of the growth. That's now happening inside of her uterus.
No, that womb has a whole lot to do with the development. There is no separate. You should read Dennis Noble's Dance to the Tune of Life. He pushes very much back against DNA being the only information necessary.
I agree. There's plenty of other things outside of. I agree 100%. There's more things than just DNA.
If you had been born into a void, you never would have happened. You never would have had a mind. You never would have had consciousness. Nothing would have ever happened with your brain other than a disaster, and it would have killed itself. Okay.
Then how did the first form of life ever grow?
This life stuff. But we should answer questions, John. We should do this again.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys want to just kind of wrap everything up, maybe tie up some loose ends if you wanted. If you want to take 30 seconds there, Mike, and then you take 30 seconds as well, John. We'll quickly get through the questions and we'll call it a night.
Okay, my summary is that John is wrong, and he's very evasive about where this ID came into effect, and I'm sort of disappointed in that. And that's it. He's wrong. I'm sorry. I'll let it go.
Well, it's very ironic that I am the one that's wrong and being accused of evading, when I think it's pretty obvious to the audience that the one evading answers to questions was the strict naturalist. And the points that I've put forth are very simple, that we require structured information programming and coding in order, and as well as nanotechnologies, which are derived from that same information in order for life to exist. Are there additional variables? Absolutely. It influence the end outcome 100%, but none of that would occur without the original source data. So unless you are willing to conclude that all of that can happen purely through undirected processes in incredibly harsh environments in the supposed ancient times for the origin of life, I don't really see how those are logical, plausible, or probable conclusions. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for joining us, Mike.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was a really good discussion. Fast paced. You guys kept it fun and entertaining. So thanks to the both of you. We'll go through a few of these questions real quick and call it a night. Mike, thanks for staying up late for us. I know you got to get up early. So let's start with Bill Morgan. Bill Morgan asks, speed of sound. Does it take intelligent design to turn raw iron into a samurai sword? Do you think a samurai sword can happen by chance?
Do I think a samurai sword can happen by chance? Not bloody likely. No, not likely. I'm going to go with it is possible for some weird shit to happen. Some Douglas Adams level stuff. Basically, I mean, there's no reason why those molecules couldn't be where they are. But it's just not very likely.
Okay.
Bill Morgan is an engineer, and he's one of my favorite engineers to listen to. My favorite clueless engineers. So,
hey, one day maybe you and Bill can have at it as well. I think that'd be.
I don't think that's going to happen.
But Speed, no more yo mama jokes, okay? It's not allowed on this channel.
No, your mama's a perfectly valid answer to how you got here.
Okay, let's go. George Bond, question for SOS. Do you consider the MO1 bacteria with 7 tails and 24 interconnecting gears a product of chance?
No, I don't consider life a product of chance at all. It's a product of the inevitability of the way the universe is structured. And what was that guy called? God, I'm not aware of that bacteria. What I really want to look at him. Could you read that to me again?
Yep, the MO1 bacteria. I can email you the exact name if you want. Well, I mean, that is it. Okay, well, we got a couple for John too, so let's go to one for John. Call Me Emo asks, by what method or methods do we identify the descendants of an original design? For example, can all insects be descended from an original archetype? Explain your answer. Go ahead, John.
Well, all insects is a very extraordinarily broad range. Theoretically possible. I would wager that there were archetypes for a variety of different types of insects. But they answered my question, or that question.
Okay, well, let's go to the next one then. We've got Nephilim Freeze coming at you there, Speed. He asks, what is the reason for believing that the use of symbolic meaning can arise from non-intelligent processes? DNA employs semiotics. Take your time.
That's kind of the basic point of semiotics is how that stuff comes into existence, and how it has a physical basis. Basically, that is semiotics. I don't see a problem. I mean, have you looked into neurons and how the brain is structured? It's inevitable, basically.
It's inevitable. If the information, if the semiotic information doesn't exist in the genetic code, how does the neuron ever come into existence?
The semiotic code exists in the DNA.
If the symbolic representation of the information in the genetic code is not translated, how does that neuron come into existence?
It certainly isn't like a blueprint DNA. Dennis Noble said it's more like a symphony. And there's no direct relationship between a neuron and a part of your DNA, okay? A code in your DNA. You're just missing the point entirely if you believe that.
So you don't think that the neurons are formed by expression of different portions of the genome?
Not only that, I mean, there's much more than that.
There's additional variables. I understand all this. I'm talking about the root of it.
No, there's no plan for a neuron in the genome. No, not directly, not in the way you're saying.
Right. How do the different cell types come into play?
Oh, that's where your epigenetic, the non-naive view of epigenetics.
No. This is the whole point of where I'm going. Is the variability of the source information enables the different cell types through epigenetics and other variables to take on different forms, but from the same information. So again, going back to the semantics and pragmatics aspect of this, the point I'm making is without foreknowledge from an intelligent agent, how does the ability for those variations to come? I think we have like over 1,000 different known cell types. Like, are you just suggesting that all that stuff just happened randomly, even though we're now being able to figure out like direct cause and effect that's happening as a result of these things that we're talking about?
Okay, the reason you think I'm evasive is because I'm not letting you channel me into this way of talking about the genome as having some sort of a blueprint to create a neuron. It's a lot more. There are many more things involved in that. If you look at morphogenesis, basically, it's like a symphony unfolding. Okay, it's not.
I'm aware. You think I'm ignorant on this? I'm aware of all this stuff that we're talking about. There are root components that are required, and without them, none of this that we're talking. That symphony could never take place if the violins and the harps and the flutes weren't already in place. You could never have a symphony. And if the music for the symphony, those instruments are going to play could not happen without intelligent agents to operate them. And the music that they're going to execute couldn't exist without a original composer, is the entire point.
Original composer. You see, I'm not going to respond to that kind of crap. I mean,
are you suggesting that Beethoven's Fifth could ever exist without Beethoven?
We're not talking music, we're talking about cells.
Okay, let's get on to the next question. So we've got Snake was right for the super chat. Thank you there, Snake. He says, John, bricks do not do anything by themselves. Chemicals react with each other on their own. He's coming at you, John, so you can have a response there.
Well, as we've discussed on more than a few occasions, Snake, a chemical reaction has nothing to do with the information that has been assigned to it. Just like if you have fireworks, it's just a chemical reaction. But if the fireworks are timed and set off with different colors and it shoots off a flag, that means there was somebody behind it. And that's exactly what's happening in the chemical reactions that are happening in biology which make life possible.
See if these cells are fireworks. Okay. Well, yeah, they have a lot in common with that, except for the part about somebody being behind it. There was no tool-making ape behind it, so Sorry. You're just sticking ID in there, and there's no logical connection between your antecedent and your consequent. I'm kind of dying here. Are there any other questions for me? I'm having a blood sugar attack. That's why I'm ill.
No problem. You know what? We do have a lot more. We'll just end it with this one last question.
Well, you can ask. I'm willing to answer my questions if you want to do me first. But.
Okay, you know, we'll end the stream with this one, and then if there's any, the audience was lively, so we got a lot of questions. So we'll just end it with this one. Speed, I know it's getting late for you. So, question from Bill Morgan again: could anything in nature be so complex that you would conclude it was probably the result of design?
Anything in nature would be so complex. I guess those buildings in the where the hell is that? Crazy city with all the oil money. Dubai, right. Those things. Yeah, they're pretty complex. But no, I don't think that there's any way to find intelligent. There's no way to conclude for intelligent design based on the complexity of the item. I don't think you can do that. There's only, like Paley's watch, there's we recognize that watch. We know about human tool making, so we recognize human tools. But I mean, if we find some very, very bizarre, complicated crystal forming in the ocean, and it's got all sorts of intricate branches, and it just, and it traces out numbers, even like the number 3 or whatever, I don't think we can conclude positively 100% that there was an intelligent designer there. I don't think you can do that with information. Information is too wily to train it into having to be intelligently designed. Okay.
So are you stating that prescriptive information and formal information is the equivalent of a crystalline pattern?
And a periodic crystal, like, and of course I'm starting to lose names now. Who was that famous quantum mechanics guy that wrote What is Life? Anyway, aperiodic crystals. And now I completely lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, well, you know what? Thanks for answering that question there, Speed. Looks like the audience had fun. George just sent in a super chat. George, thanks so much. You're putting our kids through college. So he says this has been entertaining. So lots of fun. Flew by. Tomorrow we got another exciting one. Of course, we've got John Maddox and Gutsick Gibbon. So we're looking forward to that one. Any last words, guys, before we shut it down for the night?
If anybody has any questions that I didn't answer, if they want to do it in like the comment section of this thing, I will try to get to them. I don't, the one thing I don't ever want to be is evasive. And I know, John, you think I was, but I was avoiding you putting your mindset into my mouth. But anyway, I would like to answer any questions that I did not get to in the chat. Okay. And it's just that it is very late for me. I didn't want to do it this way. You guys ever consider doing a debate with me on a Saturday morning or afternoon? I will kick your ass. Okay.
We may take you up on that offer, but that being said, this was a really good discussion, really good debate, one to remember. Any last words, John?
No, thanks for staying up late for us. Hope you're able to get up and make it to your meeting tomorrow. And hope the audience enjoyed it, had a good time. And Erica, I'm looking forward to our debate tomorrow.
Okay, I have your phone number, John. I'm going to call you when I start that meeting at 4 a.m.
All right.
So, okay.
Mike, no prank calls, okay?
Okay, guys.
I'm out of here.
We're going to hand it over to our fabulous producer here. Without praise, none of this could happen. So praise, thanks so much, brother. Shut her down whenever you're ready.